Yes, thank you very oh, thank you ever so much for having me here with you today. I really appreciate it. So, as Peter said, my name is Lydia Horbury, and I've been invited here to talk through a couple of things. So, we were going to look at the Better Buses bill and what that could deliver for passengers and the changes that we think that this bill will have. Going to have a little look at the recent results from the National Audit Office, which was a review into bus funds and the value for money. It's a very interesting document that's provoked a lot of debate. And also round up with a bit of a discussion about the key issues which you face in Somerset. I would like to hear that from you and how we can support you in your campaigning and the things that you do. So, hello, I'm Lydia. This is my contact information. I will share it again at the end. And I am, as Peter said, currently the Director for England at Bus Users and incoming Chief Executive in October. So, what I do, I sit on the Department for Transport Steering Group on enhanced partnerships. That's not to say that I'm in their pocket, rather, I am the flea in their ointment. So, I am there to give the voice of the passenger. And in particular, the work we've been doing around enhanced partnerships is the guidance that they're going to put out. So, I've been very much interested in them increasing the level of accountability, transparency, and sharing of data with the public. I am chair on various of enhanced partnership boards, including the Transport for West Midlands, South Yorkshire, and I'm a board member across Simca, which is South Yorkshire, the North East, Westmoreland, Derbyshire, Warwick, Leicester, York, and North Yorkshire, to name just a few, and others I attend, but not always on a monthly basis. I'm also an advisory board member for the Bus Centre of Excellence. So, the Bus Centre of Excellence, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, it is a DFT funded organisation and it is to try and enhance and inform the industry. So, that could take the form of training or providing guidance documents. Again, I'm there championing the passenger voice to ensure that where possible, operators take the concerns of passengers into account in their decision making. I'm also very much an advocate for women in the industry. I often find I'm often the only woman in the room when I go to conferences, etc. So I'm part of Women in Transport in their diversity and inclusion bus group. Also, Women in Bus and Coach. I'm part of the Northern Steering Group for that. I'm also a member of the Sustainable Transport Alliance because whilst I'm obviously pro bus, it doesn't mean that I am anti-tram slash ferry slash train, whatever it might be, unless it was last week and they did me dirty. So, Bus Users UK. So we are trying to ultimately, as an organisation, make public transport inclusive and to make it accessible. And that also includes promoting high standards of planning and delivery, so the number of services, etc., the frequency. We want to raise awareness of the effects of transport poverty, which is a very real thing. I don't know if any of you have ever had a look at Transport for the North study. Whilst I appreciate Somerset is not in the north, it was a very compelling read. Um, Also, looking within that transport poverty at loneliness, isolation, and social exclusion. For example, did you know that 1 in 4 bus journeys taken by people is simply because they are lonely? We also resolve passenger complaints and through that hope to improve services. Um, we are a charity. We're an approved alternative dispute resolution body for both bus and for coach, and the nominated body for dealing with complaints under the passenger right regulations. So, those are the things that give us our teeth when we are dealing with things like this. So, um, ADR, the way that it works. If you have made a complaint to a bus or coach company and you're not happy with the response, we can help you, but you have to have already gone to the bus or coach company. Our service, because we're a charity, it's utterly free to use, so there is absolutely no financial burden on cases. And then we utilise mediation to resolve the complaints that we get. We have to follow a set code of practice. We're actually part of trading standards. So, and they visit us every year and perform an audit on us. So we have set things that we need to do. And obviously, what we're doing is holding operators, so the bus operators, to account in terms of what the passenger rights regulations are and other laws that might come into play. Like, for example, if it's an accessibility issue, we may talk about things like the Equality Act. Things that we can't help with. This list looks disappointingly long, I know. But because we work for, because we have a license with trading standards, there are certain things that they say that we can't do, and we're not allowed to move outside of that remit in terms of it being an ADR issue. So, if you haven't complained to an operator, you can't complain to us. You must go to the operator in the first instance. If the problem is over 12 months old, we can't help you. Uh, if the journey's in London, because interestingly, London has its own complaints process, and that's because it all comes under the franchise, of course, which is Transport for London. So they're looked after by our friends at London Travel Watch. We do work closely with, and if anybody came to us with a London problem, we would just simply direct them. We also don't do Northern Ireland. They again have their own regulations over there. Unfortunately, we can't deal with minors unless their parents have said so and give permission. We can't help people who aren't bus passengers. We frequently get emails from people saying, I was driving and we saw a bus and it pulled out in front of me. And well, I'm very sorry about that, but you are not a bus passenger on a journey, so that is not for us to help you with. Um, when complaints already fall into a legal space, we're unable to help. So if somebody is suing a bus company, we can't make it an ADR case at that point. When a bus company has a commercial or policy decision. So, for example, the best one of this that I can give that comes frequently is National Express in their terms and conditions have something very specific about luggage and lost luggage. So, and because that is part of their commercial policy, that's something that we can't challenge. We can't force a bus operator to change its internal processes. And because we deal with coach as well, sometimes the responsibilities fall into the tour operator, like accommodation, food, that kind of thing. Obviously, we don't deal with that. So, sadly, there's lots of things we can't do. But what I'm talking about here is specifically about things that we take on as ADR. Now, as a body, we do half the time we're working on complaints, and we have teams of people across England, Scotland, and Wales who do that all day long. But the other half of what we do is the lobbying and the advocacy work and the campaigning that we do. So we work Oh, bless you. Communities, operators, local authorities, and government. So this was last Monday, went down to the Houses of Parliament. And so something that's important to me is that we have a strong relationship with the APPG or political party group for bus and coach. So the lady in the dotty dress in the middle is Alex Mayer, and the lady in the red jacket, I'm sure you'll have heard of Ruth Cadbury of the Transport Select Committee. She was the person that when they released their report that was, I think it was only about 3 months ago, talking about accessibility in the UK, she said it was a national embarrassment. So Ruth, doesn't pull her punches. I am a fan, needless to say. So, sweeping across quickly to the Better Buses Bill. So, it's just had its second reading in Parliament, and I thought we'd kind of whiz through key themes. Um, and I will add a bit of my own personal feelings as well to it. Um, so in all, it's a very positive thing, the Better Buses Bill. It has potential. It's very much about giving back control, buses being looked after locally. Because let's face it, buses are local, and you really need to understand a local need to then to be able to meet that need. So obviously in combined authority areas, there's lots of talk about more and more franchising, and they're making that a lot easier for areas to do, which gives back power over route planning, fares, and timetables. So, like I say, it's all about the local needs rather than just commercial policies, as happens sometimes now. In areas where it's not going to be a franchise, again, they're trying to give greater responsibility to the enhanced partnerships. And as I said earlier, as part of that steering group, we're really trying to make accountability a lot stronger at the moment because, as you know, enhanced partnerships and BSIP money exists all over the country. But because they write their own plan, it's like marking your own homework. So you're meeting your own standards that you have set. And sometimes those standards are, very wishy-washy. So, for example, BSIP money and enhanced partnership does really require for there to be some kind of customer charter. But often you find that the targets that are set there are rather than being really specific and measurable, wishy-washy. Did you meet that? Did you not? We want to be better. No, no, give me a percentage, that kind of thing. Um, Another thing from the Better Buses Bill is that it has a duty to review services. So it's about doing essentially an audit. So they need to look at all their services and they need to identify where those gaps exist. That has to be looked at properly. Um, and there is also a promise in there that they need to ensure that services are reliable, accessible, and sufficient for all communities. And I'm going to talk in a minute about social necessary services. Essentially, this sounds very exciting because, as we all know, there's been a huge reduction in bus services, frequency, and mileage. And essentially, now what the government are saying is no, you need to make sure that those routes are there. There's going to be minimum service levels. So they're saying that there are going to be some minimum service standards. Campaign for Better Transport have written a paper on this, and I have contributed as well to it recently to try and make sure that those minimum standards are really what should be a minimum standard and not just some kind of easy score for them to meet. It's about making sure that communities absolutely aren't cut off, basic connectivity is there, and we're looking at things like frequency, coverage, and key destinations, so where people travel. So often, bus planning is done on what happened the year before, or because that's always been a route. What we're really advocating is a lot more passenger engagement. There have been so many cases where we've had to wade in and get involved. Simple things like a supermarket has been built, and we're like, okay, let's add that onto the route. So you're going one further. Or a local college has changed its start time. Right, let's amend the timetable so that the children can actually get to their education on time. So things that like that. Um, let's move over to the next one. Sorry, I've had to move my little bar with everyone's faces on. Right, there. So it's also about integration with other modes, and it was nice, Peter, when you were talking about active travel and kind of suggesting towards integration at the beginning, because of course bus can't operate alone. Often it needs to interact with rail or tram or ferry or whatever you have in your locality, and even the demand responsive services, community transport. We have a duty to look after vulnerable passengers ultimately. Um, Better accountability and transparency. So, operators are going to be compelled to provide a lot more detailed information on services to authorities. And authorities aren't just going to go, oh, that's nice, dear, and put it to one side. They have to monitor performance and they're going to be forced to also to intervene where services are underperforming. So previously, there's been that relationship where there has been some performance monitoring, but that has been limited, and those interventions have not been forced. So that's where the difference lies. And also, there's a bit more opportunity for innovation because the Better Buses bill encourages new and slightly different models of delivery. So people are starting to look into different partnerships with community transport and on demand. and also looking at pilots for greener and also smarter buses. On demand is a whole different topic. We could probably talk for about 3 hours for that just alone. Um, and finally, so funding and investment. So it's looking at, and this is much fairer, a needs-based funding allocations to local authorities. Previously, the way that bus money has been allocated has been through the BSIPs, which is the Bus Service Improvement Plans. And whilst they do require an application and lots of information. It's also true that the people that are best at filling out forms, and maybe they might pay a consultant to do it, probably the places that got the most money. It's not necessarily in the past been based on need. So it's targeted investment to address the gaps rather than competitive applications and pitching areas against each other. Um, the other thing with that as well, of course, is that, so many of us might live on county borders. So it's all very well doing regional investment where area gets a lot and has a lot of change. But if you are somebody that has to cross the border on a daily basis, that's not particularly helpful. Socially necessary services. So the measures to ensure the provision of socially necessary services by the LTAs, they're going to be forced to consider essential routes when planning. And this is very important, protection against service cancellation. So if a service has been audited and deemed to be socially necessary, they can't cancel it. They can't say, right, we're going to cut that route. It's not commercially viable. So that's something that is super important that we really, really welcome. So effectively, the Better Buses Bill moves from more of a commercial stance across to a more passenger focused. But as with anything, ultimately, it's going to be down to the delivery because what it says on paper and the aims that it has, fantastic. But how they are going to be specifically going to do these things, how these things are going to be measured, and the process is yet remains to be seen. So, whizzing on to something that I found particularly interesting when it came out recently, and I was involved in a webinar about this. So, the National Audit Office. So it did a big survey on local buses and essentially the value for money that it believed. And these were the key figures, the headlines. I don't know if you've seen these already. I really don't wish to bore you. But these are the key things that came out. So £5.9 billion was DFT funding for buses between 2020 and 2025. 2 billion, which was support for COVID, and 9% percentage decline in bus passenger services since 2019-20 and now. So people have not come back to the bus, essentially, is what we're saying. 50% of bus sector revenue comes from public funding. 15% is a reduction in bus services outside of London, and that was measured in kilometres. 2,799 ZEBs, or zero emission buses, part funded by DFT. 13 is the number of separate grants that DFT have used to fund buses. So if you work in bus and you work in part of the local authority, or potentially an operator, but mainly the authority, the number of grants that you have to apply for is really quite mind-boggling. And because of the way that the funding's done, it's a bit of an ever-moving feast. 13 million to 22 million, the DfT's estimate of costs on the transition to franchising for an LTA, depending on the size and assuming that it does it fully. There's been a lot of discussion about areas who want to bring in pockets of micro franchising, particularly where you may have a county or an area that is quite rural, but then has specific small, very busy bits. And 46%, the last one, which is the percentage of local transport authorities in 23, which rated their own capacity to deliver local transport as very or fairly poor. Yes, you heard that correctly. Um, it's quite scary, isn't it? So, I mean, kind of the sweeping headlines are that obviously successive governments have been trying. They've really been trying to improve bus services, and certainly it's something that's been very palpable recently. But there has been quite a lot of investment, but despite that, the outcomes aren't necessarily being achieved. Obviously, COVID-19 was a huge disruption to this, and it meant that there was a huge step backwards. So, as a result of that, then the government effectively were having to support the survival of the bus sector and the operators. So, whilst there has been progress, there's long-standing issues, and those still remain. Um, and Sorry, my screen flashed then. I thought, what's going on? Yeah, so the commercial viability has weakened. That's for a whole number of reasons. There've been obviously increasing costs, so we know things like fuel costs, but then also the bus sector has been also hit by stuff like the hike in national insurance and that kind of thing too. Um, the number of passengers overall has reduced. So essentially, there is a real gap here. If buses are going to be viable commercially, and therefore they're then better able to pass on savings and be more affordable for passengers, they're going to need tools to help survive with that. So DFT are looking to people like the Bus Centre of Excellence, looking at funding, looking at policy interventions to be able to try and support that and that improvement. So I'm aware that I have talked non-stop. And I know that we wanted probably to talk about some of the issues that you have in Somerset. So I'm just going to flash up, lastly, my contact details again, should anybody require them. I know that Peter also can signpost to me. And Peter, I think that we should open it to the wider floor.
Peter, you're still on mute. Peter, you're on mute.
There we are. Thank you, Tony. Not often people complain that they can't hear me. Um, Lydia, one of the concerns we have here is what's happening in Hampshire, which is not far away from where we are, where we see the LTA cutting its own funding of buses, being allowed to do that by the DFT. And as a consequence, we're seeing routes cut in Hampshire. And the DFT seems to be allowing that to happen. Are, are you aware of this development and have you got any comments on it?
So, Hampshire, I do believe Hampshire's where the waterside change makers are based. Is that ringing a bell to anybody? They are the bus user campaigning group over there, so I have been in touch with them. They're led by a very interesting chap, Ben, and it was Tom, but I believe Tom stepped back recently due to a change in career. And Ben used to be the transport editor for the Times.
Hmm.
He is on the case. So I was extremely grateful to meet an MP called Tom Gordon recently. And both Waterside Changemakers and I had approached Tom as a sympathetic MP. I always like to find sympathetic ones. I send out frequent emails, as we're trying to garner support for various things. And he held a round table. And so we were able to meet in person. So I know that there has been some kind of significant campaigning, and there have been a couple of routes that have been saved that they have gone back to the drawing board for. But yes, overall, there has been a cut. And as I understand it now, it's about looking at demand responsive transport. However, when the better, I got that wrong there, better buses bill comes in, they're really going to have to undertake this audit about what is socially necessary. And if there are people who are literally isolated because of the lack of the bus, even though they've cut the service, they're going to have to revisit that. So I'll be very interested. But yes, we are in touch with them in that neck of the woods. But yeah, quite frankly, it's disgusting, isn't it?
Yeah. So as and when the Better Buses Bill comes into fruition, the DFT is going to be policing it very actively.
I imagine that it will be sufficient that because there has to be an audit undertaken as to what a social necessary service is, we don't quite know exactly how it's going to work, but certainly I know that we will be looking into that as well and where people are flagging that there is, areas without routes, that we will be something that we'll be able to take forward. However, what is not sure is that that would necessarily always take the format of a bus
Right.
because that obviously looking and there have been various trials with DRT and Community Transport Association because actually the thing that is most important, isn't it, that people can get to go where they want, that they can remain independent when they want. It's not necessarily that a bus turns up, but it's that people can travel. So
Yeah, we're here in Somerset, we're seeing now digital DRT being rolled out. Was an initial trial and now it's being rolled out into other areas. Um, Stephen, you've got your hand up. If anybody wants to raise a question, just raise ideally their digital hand. Stephen.
Hello, Lydia.
hi.
Hello, just quickly.
Yeah.
I'm from Hampshire, and yeah, know Ben very well. In fact, what we've done, we've created very similar to Somerset. We've created a network because there's about 5 to 8 other groups in Hampshire, and unfortunately, one community we've had have had their not only their commercial services cut, but their community transport as well, and they are totally isolated. So we're running a number of campaigns where are you going to be at the Bus Centre of Excellence event next week?
Yes, the one in Portsmouth.
Yes, because I'll catch
Yeah.
up with you then, if that's
Yeah.
okay.
No, that's
That
absolutely
gives the
fine.
people of Somerset more time then to on this meeting. Okay, so I'll sign off for now. And
Yeah,
that's
it's all right. Stephen, in the morning of the day, because I'm on a panel in the afternoon. So I have to be
okay.
before lunch, okay?
Okay, catch you then.
Message me on LinkedIn.
All
Okay,
right,
thank you.
bye then.
So, as I say, just raise your digital hand if you've got a question that you wish to put. Jevon.
Um, just to say that one thing that's quite hot at the moment is driver awareness of multi-operator ticketing. That's quite hot at the moment and isn't in a policy, in my opinion, among every operator to be mandatory, to be minimal explained, so that a driver is aware of validity.
Okay, that's interesting. So would you say that is there kind of true multimodal ticketing in your region?
Not here in
In
Somerset. It's one of
parts,
the
but not
issues.
in Somerset. Like, for example, in Weka, you have some, but I've got no necessity to it when it comes to the ticketing. Like, say you board one operator, say, for example, a stagecoach, a big lemon, but they present on, say, the big lemon, a stagecoach ticket.
Yeah,
The lemon driver goes, no, that's not valid. It's a stagecoach, but it has a shared partnership between operator,
yeah.
right? The driver has no aware that that has a right to travel, and it is a national affair, not just in the region, but if it was brought up in Somerset, say, you see what I'm getting at?
I do. I
We need
do.
these policies brought
Yeah.
up around.
A
Yeah.
situation, Lydia, here in Somerset is that we've been pushing the Somerset Council to introduce a multi-operator ticket. They're waiting for the national scheme to develop, whereas elsewhere, including in Weka, as Jevons just mentioned, which is a neighbouring authority, the bus operators have agreed to introduce it themselves, and we're trying to encourage Somerset Council to play a role or
Yeah.
to encourage the bus operators to play a role in establishing multi-operator tickets, but as yet we haven't really got them.
No, and I think that it does seem like it is an ambition, and again, I would say that this comes under the Better Buses Bill, that they are kind of suggesting that people do that. And I mean, it's only just happened in Greater Manchester. They appear to have managed to crack, and we're starting to see it in the Northeast. They also have multi-operator ticketing. But I think it's an ambition. It's a commonly held ambition. Jevon, I think where a ticket should be able to be used, so there's an agreement between operators, and that's not happening. You should be able to, if they, for example, end up charging you, then, if you come to us, we can make sure that you get a refund, and then we can have a go at them from that perspective, because we can say, look, we have formal complaints,
Yeah.
and that gives
So
us some.
you're aware I travel around the country. I even went up to the Midlands, believe it or not, on the weekend to
Yeah,
Solihull and Birmingham, where they'll have the publicity I expect wider explained to more bus drivers who do common work in the area that have had the experience, but could, like this area that don't lack the publicity, right? Between passenger and driver more, and the demand is less, right? You then get less and less of the demand, less and less of a wares on top.
Thanks, Jevon. I think we'll take it away. It's not actually an issue currently, unfortunately, in Somerset. Joe Sargent.
Hi there, Lydia. It's really interesting hearing what you had to say. I'm from an organisation called Reclaim Our Buses, West of England, and obviously we are a neighbouring authority to Somerset, and so we do have issues. And I think one of the things you did touch on was boundaries or borders.
yeah,
And obviously, as a combined mayoral authority, we have sort of like more at the moment, as far as I know, slightly more powers in terms of how we can control the buses, maybe in terms of franchising. And I wanted to ask a couple of questions about that if people will
yeah,
indulge me, but I'll go to the boundaries one first. I'd like to know what you feel, how you feel it, what you feel it would look like, because we've had cases where people who live in South Gloucestershire, for example, which is part of the combined authority region, have to get to a service that is over the border in Gloucestershire. And I'm sure this has happened in Bath and North East Somerset and Somerset, and also North Somerset and Somerset at times. And the service is not recognised as going over the border or not being funded by there, and therefore the services are not available to our residents. So it's that as a sort of question I have, and I'm sure this is probably of relevance to Somerset in terms of how it's not just the bus companies, it's the authorities. It's requesting that the authorities properly work together. And then the other question I had was about something I think is known as the bus levy, which is what councils in constituent councils are meant to pay to the combined authority. Now, this may just be a WECA thing, I don't know, but the levy is this what we're paying to get our services delivered by WECA or through WECA. Obviously, most of them are done by First, but it's another story. But the funding hasn't increased since it was agreed, I believe, and David Redgewell may well be able to comment on this, that since 2017, when the combined authority was first set up, it's remained at the same amount. I think it's something like £90 million a year. And the councils are meant to pay that, but it hasn't gone up. And this is one of the reasons I'm given to believe that WECA isn't able to maybe deliver on as many things for buses as it would like. So with regard to the buses bill, is there
yeah.
anything in there? Nothing to provide for that shortfall in funding. Okay, well that was a quick answer.
Right, Joe,
I'm
that
happy
could have been
to
the longest question in the history of the world, my love. So,
with
the
the shortest
first
answer.
one, you're asking me about cross-border travel. What is the question?
Well, the question is, how do we make it happen? How do
Okay.
we make what is there in the bill that's going to make the local authorities, where whoever they are, cooperate properly and provide those services so that people are not losing out on their services just because they're across the boundary.
The short answer is there is nothing that's going to make that happen, sadly.
Right.
It's something that is discussed widely at meetings on a very regular basis. Um, as you correctly point out, cross-border travel, it very much varies. It's up to the local authorities to have those discussions with neighbouring authorities. Where I live, it happens. So I live at the bottom of West Yorkshire, and the next town along is Barnsley, which is in South Yorkshire. So, we have children going education and work and that kind of thing. We also have issues with passes that can't be used. So, concessionary passes and things that aren't always, depending on what they're issued for, recognised as well between borders, because some people extend, for example, the times that you can use them. I had a case recently, somebody approached me and it was altered. I can't remember where they lived or worked, that there was something between Blackpool and Bury, which aren't particularly far apart, and they could travel one way, but they couldn't travel the other. You just think, where are we living? So it is a huge problem, Joe, absolutely. It's something that has been raised on multiple occasions. There is nothing definitive that's, the solution that's in the bill. I do believe there is a feeling that it's something that people are beginning to do more about. And I just hope that this wholesale change that is afforded by the Better Buses bill, hopefully renewed funding, it sounds like funding is going to be a bit more ring fenced and a bit clearer year on year, so we know what we're getting in the industry, that will encourage that kind of movement. In terms of the levy, so levies tend to happen, don't they, when you have different local authorities, and they normally then chip in, if you like, to a collective transport budget. So you're saying that the levy or the overall budget hasn't increased because the levy's not increased. And it could be, though, that because actually bus funding, the BSIP money is coming in elsewhere. That's why they haven't needed to increase.
Look, the problem we have, Lydia, is David Redfield, I'm the Mayor's Transport Board advisor on the BSIP, is that we don't have preset powers, which you'd understand, and we don't have them. So we rely on a levy, and Joe's absolutely right.
Okay.
The councils that form WECA plus North Somerset's about to join, made an application last night going through council and through Parliament, don't want to pay that levy. And unless the mayor gets precepting powers, we are stuck where we are. And we're £15 million short on our transport budget for tendered services, including crossing the border. So, so that's where the problem lies. But we have resolved those issues of cross-border buses between Gloucestershire and South Gloucestershire and WECA. And as Peter Travis will tell you, most of the services in the north of Somerset, including the ones that go to Taunton and Yeovil, are joint funded between Somerset County Council and the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority. So it's working together. I think it's just protocol with the new mayor, really. That's not really how you want to do it. But I did put in the question, so Lydia might take it back. I saw Stephen Fiddler yesterday. We had the bus conference in Leeds.
Yeah.
With DFT and I don't know if you're with the Confederation of Passenger Transport, but cross-border buses were raised. We've got issues around the Falcon not being properly covered off the Plymouth to Bristol local bus, which is actually coaches, and some of our national expresses are registered as local services. And there's a great concern in our part of the world they'll fall off the edge. So that might be something you want to go back and take back to raise. But Joe is right. We need precepting powers, but mayoral combined authorities will grow in our area. Gloucestershire will go into WECA, and there will be one for Wessex with Somerset, Dorset, Wiltshire, Bournemouth, and Christchurch, and possibly Swindon, or Somerset might go in with Devon and Cornwall. But those maps are being done, as you know. But that's where the bus money and rail money will go.
Thanks, David. Sarah Webb, you've had your hand up for some time. Sarah, you're on mute at the moment.
Hi, sorry to keep you waiting. First and foremost, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you. So thank you so much for coming today. What I was going to ask is that in Temple Combe we have very privileged to have a railway, but there is no integrated bus train service. How is that? Is there going to be anything, Lydia, in the new bill that will encourage rubber rails?
No, basically. Again, it's one of those things that it's listed as an aim. This is what we're hoping to do, but it doesn't appear that there's the measures necessarily to be able to force that to happen. I interestingly did a webinar not that long ago with the Community Rail Network, and they were talking about integration, and they were saying like how can we make it happen? And what's really interesting is that there's a number of issues, but actually so number one, historically, the way that railway stations have been built, this is a common thing that is said when we say, why
Yeah.
don't you do this? That there just isn't the space for buses to stop outside. Lots of stations, like physically, where would that bus stop? Our response is always, people have legs. I'm quite sure they'd be quite happy to walk a couple of blocks to be able to
They
get.
also manage when it's a rail replacement service as well.
Exactly. And as a resident of Huddersfield, I don't know if you know, but we have no station for a whole month. So, that's
Yeah.
something I'm encountering all the time at the moment. And I think the other thing with that actually is that the rail, it's the people who do the rail timetables who are the most inflexible. So for example, if you have bus and rail integration, and it's let's say it's a bus that is quite infrequent and it is like a longer journey with a couple of hops, then if a bus is late because of awful congestion, a breakdown, a smash, somebody's digging up the roads, the the rail won't shift. It won't. They absolutely cannot. Will not hold it. So there are times that it's been tried. So they did a whole piece of work in Edinburgh a few years ago. And they found that because the bus priority was really poor at the time, the buses, so they tried to integrate it and they had the buses going to the station, but they kept missing the train. So that was really terrible. But we are also seeing some areas where it has been a little bit more successful and it's something they're trying to do. So in Manchester now, where they've got the integrated ticketing system, they've done some work and there's some really good lessons to be learned how they have done that. And what you need to do is do a whole load of tracking about people's active journeys as well. Because so often there's not necessarily, unless you actually go out there and find out, you need to find out those journeys that people are doing. So then they're better able to integrate that. So at the moment, I'm directing people when they're looking at integration to Manchester. It's a really good way of doing it.
Okay. We're a tiny little village, and by comparison, and actually the transport plan completely has ignored the fact that we even have a station, because they only count the Great Western Line. They don't count the Exeter to Waterloo line, which is even sadder. But I just think there's so much potential, and it's a great pity. But I will keep persevering. So thank you.
Yeah, I would just get in touch, Sarah, with whoever is the local the chair of the local EP that covers your area, and to put it forward as a suggestion, to be really kind of explicit with it. Somebody in Cornwall recently had been in touch with us talking about similar things, and they had a specific suggestion, a route, a plan. It was something that wouldn't cost a huge amount of money. They spoke to us, and we were able to go and talk to the local authority with them and help present their plans. And as a consequence, there has been some change. There has been some shift. So I think you kind of sometimes have to go, look, you've got a problem, but I have a solution for you, and go in a compelling way. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's lovely to meet you once again. So thank you for spending time this evening with us.
Thanks, Sarah. Anthony Lamb, I think you've got a question about the old age pensioner concessionary tickets.
Yes, I do.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yes.
can.
Good. It was something that happened to me this morning. I tried to use my bus pass. No, it was a couple of days ago now. I tried to use my bus pass on a bus that was waiting to go at the time my bus pass became valid. But I couldn't board the bus until that time. And the driver was quite relaxed about it and said, "Well, come and use it later on." But had there been a crowd of us all wanting to use our bus pass,
Yeah.
we would have delayed the departure of the bus because the software would not allow us to
Yeah.
use it until that particular time. And I'm just wondering if anybody's ever thought of that.
Yes, people have. So we have been calling for reforms to the ENCTS for a long time now in our manifesto. And last week, again, working with Tom Gordon, we got a motion in Parliament. He then proposed a petition, which they then voted on. At the reading of the Better Buses bill. Sadly, it was declined because what we have is a system where the government fund the concessionary travel from after 9:30 and up to 11 o'clock at night as well. So if you've been out to the disco, you can't get home if you're getting on the night bus. But it is up to local authorities if they want to extend that, so they can chip some. It can be 24 hours, and that's for people who have the older persons pass, and also for those people with disabilities. You've probably heard there's been a lot in the news about Liz Kennedy saying everyone must get back to work, and so I'm saying to her, how do people get to work? People don't suddenly wake up in the morning and then suddenly at 9:30 get a disability. They when they wake up, that need is still there. And that need for travel and that assumption that people with disabilities or older people don't work or don't need to travel at that time, quite frankly, is ridiculous. So, what we've ended up with as a country is literally a complete patchwork. So, it is a postcode lottery as to where you live, as to how you are able to access transport. And that is social justice to me. That's absolute inequality, isn't it, at the base of things, if you are essentially not letting people do that. So, Anthony, I feel your pain. I was hugely disappointed by the vote. We have formed something called the Accessible Transport Alliance. Talked about the Waterside Changemakers. I said they've been campaigning about this too. So have we, but we have now been joined by the biggest charities in the UK. We have all put our might towards this, and now Parliament's back in swing. We've been gathering all of our reports and data, and we are going to continue to push this because, as far as I'm concerned, it goes against the Equalities Act at its very, base. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
thank you for raising.
Well, interestingly, I was boarding the bus at Weston-super-Mare, which it starts for 9 o'clock, not 9:30, and it was 9 o'clock when I was trying to board the bus, and the driver said it's not valid until 9 o'clock, and I said, "Well, you're not leaving till 9 o'clock." He said, "Well, I can't let you board and use your card until 9 o'clock, so go and sit down and come back later and use the card." It just seemed to be so silly.
It does. It really does.
Mm. And you've answered lots of other questions that I had for you, so thank you very much.
Okay, lovely.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Anthony. Rosa Kell.
Yes, hi there. Good evening, Lydia. Lovely to see you. Um, you've answered the disability pass question already. Thank you for that. However, what is concerning, and there seems to be no national um, guidelines on this, why is it a disabled pass when reaching pension age suddenly converts to a pensionable pass? And therefore, you lose the facilities that you had before.
So, so,
Um,
so what do you mean by that? So, what is it that you lose?
well, but by converting your pass
Yeah.
away from a disabled pass into a age pass, you lose, for instance, the ability in some areas of traveling at 9 o'clock as opposed to 9:30. All the advantages that you would have had as a disabled bus pass holder.
Okay.
Uh,
I think, yeah, that's that question again of what local areas choose to do. So it's not standard that somebody with a disabled pass can travel before somebody with an older person's pass, say, for example. The part that, ENCTS, it's supposed to be across the board. And like I say, the government do the 9:30 through to 11. Anything else is in addition. So I understand what you're saying, Rosa. I don't think that is correct. That should not be the case that they are forcing you over to a different pass. Um,
That was my question.
yeah,
Surely, just because you become pensionable doesn't
no,
mean you lose your disability. Therefore,
exactly.
you should still have your disability pass.
Is that something that's happened to someone that you know or yourself, Rosa?
Yes, it has, but it was a general point that I wanted to make there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I would, outside of this, like to know more about that, and that's something that I would like to talk to
I
DFT
okay.
about.
I will send you an email. I've got your
Great.
details.
Thank
And
you.
then just one other question, if I may. I
Yeah.
wondered what actions are you as a group, as a charity, as a representative of bus passengers, are you planning on doing regarding the fact that the new bus bill doesn't seem to include a obligations to talk to bus passenger groups when it comes to
Okay.
working out what is an essential service?
Yeah, no. So that what we're doing is we're making sure that goes in through the enhanced partnership guidelines and the franchising guidelines, and we are on the steering groups of that. So we've been very, very strident about that, and that will be incorporated.
Thank you very much for that answer.
Yeah, no, it will be.
Very welcome news. That's a concern that has been raised amongst people in the Somerset Bus Partnership over the
Yeah,
last week. So
yeah.
that's very reassuring, Lydia. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it is. It's in there. It is in there. Because, how are they going to find out what is socially necessary without talking to passengers? But, as we were saying, it's not enough just to for consultancy, to happen once. It's got to be something that is ongoing. So that has been written in.
Okay. David Moore.
Hello. I hear you okay.
Yes, you're a little bit
Can you hear
patchy.
me okay?
Yes, yeah, that's better.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I just wanted to give some feedback, helpful for Sarah Webb, maybe at Temple Combe, because I am aware of one officer who I know at least called Nick Richards. Now,
Are we all struggling to hear,
Yeah,
David?
David, I'm afraid
he,
your
he
connection isn't very good.
works for. Is that
I'm sorry, David, we just can't hear you. You're breaking up. It's not
better?
your fault, it's the line, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
David, perhaps you could type in the chat whatever it is that you wanted to say, and we'll take another question and then maybe be able to view yours in writing.
Okay. Anthony, your hand is up. Is that a legacy hand or is that a new issue?
Sorry, yes, I forgot to put it down.
Okay. Are there any other issues anybody wishes to raise with Lydia? Well, Lydia, you seem to have silenced us. I find that quite surprising. So it's just down to me to repeat the thanks that you've heard from various members of our team. It's great that you've been able to make and engage with Somerset Bus Partnership and also our friends from across the borders in Hampshire and the West of England Combined Authority, who we do work with on various projects. I think we'd like to maintain this link with you. I'm sure you want to stay in touch with us. We have a lot of issues. Yes, we're very aware of the transport problems and deficiencies in the north, which are being addressed. But we've got some fairly substantial deficiencies in Somerset. We have the worst rated bus services in the country. Therefore, it's important that we do engage with people like you, with our MPs, and make the case to the DFT that Somerset needs help. But one thing we need to do is to use buses, and that's something we've been campaigning throughout Somerset this month to encourage more and more people to use buses, and we hope that that will bear fruit. So thank you very much, Lydia, for spending an hour or so with us. Thank you for talking to us prior to this meeting, and let's stay in touch and see what we can do to improve our bus services here in Somerset.
Absolutely. And, Peter, I think it's a good idea if you're a conduit, if there are some really key issues and I can offer any advice or guidance, I'd be very happy. It's always difficult when it's kind of you're on the spot and you're trying to think, so sometimes it's about me reaching out to contacts that I have as well to be able to have some full and frank conversations and explain concerns more fully. But also wanted to thank you for inviting me tonight. It was genuinely a pleasure to be here with you all tonight. And I think that the work that you do as bus user groups is fantastic. All the campaigning, the 40 plus events you're doing during Catch the Bus Month, and the passion that you've got for your local services is incredible. And so we're only as strong as the local voices that we represent, and your voices in Somerset are loud and clear. And I love the fact that you're also passionate about buses as well. It allows me to chat about my favourite topic because we know that a bus is not just a mode of transport, is it? It is a lifeline. It's that connection to the doctor's appointment. It's how you get to work. It's how you go to the supermarket and buy your food. It's how you make sure that you're not lonely. It's how you stay in touch with your friends and your family, or you go to the gym or you go for walks. Buses are absolutely vital. So it's important that we keep shouting and make sure that those services are the best they can possibly be. So thank you ever so much.
Lydia, can I just ask you the big issue that we're picking up down here? This is David Redross on the bus advisory boards around here. Is this cross-border stuff? If you can take that back, we
Yeah.
have a real worry about cross-border services in South West England. Somerset don't actually control many buses. They control them with Wecker, with Dorset, with Devon.
Okay.
We've got the Falcon, and we need to. I said to Stephen Fiddler, there is not a way, and there's also where National Express is a local regional bus for us.
Okay.
Those are not protected in the bill. If you could pick that up, I'd be very, very grateful. Thank
Okay,
you.
David, what I suggest is that you just give me like a very kind of brief summary. That would be great if you could email that to me so that I have some kind of fact and some clear examples, say.
Yeah, we'll get
So I
that to
know
you.
that I'm able to talk about. And I think I really probably need to approach your authority and suggest that they let me join their board, don't you?
Yes, I think that would be an excellent move. Okay, Lydia, thank you very much indeed. We keep on shouting here in Somerset for buses, don't you worry.
Thank you, Lydia. Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and thank you for coming.